un partner importante anche per il futuro è proprio la Fondazione ZDHC. Qui ringraziamo Michel per la sua presenza oggi e soprattutto vorrei chiedere questo: siccome il vostro ruolo è stato fondamentale per dare delle risposte anche tecniche ai grandi brand, anche in risposta proprio al progetto Detox di Greenpeace, e sia sulla parte della formazione sia nella parte della consulenza alle imprese è stato un ruolo fondamentale. Cosa vi aspettate nei prossimi anni? Quali sono i vostri obiettivi? E cosa, se dovete fare un bilancio, come sta andando tutto il vostro percorso? Quindi grazie Frank e ti do la parola.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for having me. It's an honor, and especially hearing you talking about the students and the impact on the way they educated right now. I have to say it's devastated. I'm very honored to have the possibility to be here. Nevertheless, I would prefer to see you in person, as I had the opportunity to come and visit you in Prato at an early stage, where I believe we haven't been ready to collaborate. And Chiara, I have to say I appreciate. So when I'm looking at the Greenpeace goals, and should I say crazy goals, nevertheless, when I'm looking at Greenpeace, you did an amazing job in 2011, and clearly you have the credits. Without Greenpeace, we wouldn't be here right now. Nevertheless, just looking into the future to 2030, there is a difference between an NGO and what we say. We are organized as an NGO, but we are a collaborative initiative with the relevant stakeholders. We are still remaining to be a brand-led organization, as we strongly believe that brands have responsibility to drive behavior change in the supply chain. Behavior change in the supply chain means setting requirements to manufacturers. But is that good enough for the future? If we are setting requirements to manufacturers and the manufacturers just keeping them up to keep the business, we believe we have to achieve the implementation for purpose. And the implementation for purpose means if a manufacturer, the facility, is ready to go the extra mile to really not only fulfill customer requirements, but also to implement a sustainable chemical management in framework for purpose. And I think what ZDHC has achieved is that we align the industry behind a framework that is, and you mentioned tools and guidelines, as well as technical solutions that help to implement the manufacturing restricted substance list. And again, I think this is where Greenpeace has get the credits to shift the paradigm from a pretty much output-focused textile industry, where we looked at the outputs and we tested in terms of product compliance, towards the input at the process chemistry, really at the beginning of the production process. That was a game changer. When I started in 2015, people said, "Oh, Frank, you are the executive director. Okay, MRSL implementation, that doesn't work. Chiara, we're both crazy. It does work." And I think we have shown the industry that there are ways on how you can implement a manufacturing restricted substance list and how you can make this work. In early pilots, we have looked at the way on how we can build a database of all sustainable chemical formulations that are available right now based on our not so ambitious MRSL. And we really achieved that together with our key stakeholders because they believe in the mission. And I think that was the game changer throughout the years. But I'm looking in the future, and I think our job is far from done. So when we initially in 2011 looked at the Detox campaign, and we started training suppliers, we started wastewater testing. So we were the chemistry guys. We were the guys that just had that list. And now we're looking into related impact areas of sustainable chemistry. And I'm very pleased to hear to hear that Stella McCarthy is investing in sustainability, and I believe that sustainable chemical management is the backbone. If we look at climate change, where is the biggest impact? The biggest impact is wet processing. So when I'm turning the boilers up, I use a lot more energy. If I'm using effective chemistry, I can work more energy efficient. The same things about water stewardship. If I need less water, I do need to pollute less water. So those effects are all interrelated. So the ways on how we're working has completely evolved, also in terms of biodiversity, and of course, as we see here, circularity. We are working with important stakeholders so far as we received recognition based on the progress we made. We work with the UNEP, we work with the OECD, and we are in innovative projects where we analyze the entire value chain of fashion production, and really from the cotton seed up to the ready-made garment, to evaluate the chemical impacts and not just looking and focus at the wet processing. So we're working with thought leaders like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and we want to accelerate our global impact by building alliances, for example, with the Apparel Coalition in the US and Textile Exchange, and engage, for example, with the Policy Hub to educate policymakers. And I think, Chiara, you made a really good point, again, about crazy expectations. And I love your approach about supply chain due diligence, about supply chain responsibilities. Because when we are phasing out one particular substance in the EU, does that help? It does not help. Because this compound will be produced in other parts of the region, other parts of the world, and still maintained in production as long as some regional retailer is buying that stuff. And when I'm looking at responsible supply chains, I also mean that we have to educate policymakers what they can really achieve, and what effects those processes they have, those legislation they have on businesses. And I think here is an essential difference to Greenpeace and to what ZDHC is trying to achieve. We need to build a case, and that case means we're taking away complexity in supply chains. Complexity in supply chains means we had in the past multiple RSLs. We had many different approaches out there in the industry, even with good intentions. So we had retailers that had their own program. And when I started in early days, manufacturers, they told me, Frank, this is amazing, ZDHC, I like the idea. However, it is just an additional ask. So ZDHC is just an additional ask. I have brand X, Y, Z, they all have their individual approaches. And that doesn't give me any support. It's still the complexity that is out there. Now what we achieved with brands like H&M, Inditex, with huge volumes aligning on one MRSL and the framework, and we do get the awareness and the recognition. And here we are with our collaboration. And I think this is going exactly in this direction, that we're looking at thought leaders in the Prato region that are working on innovative processes like recycling wool, where we can raise the bar in all different areas. So when I'm looking beyond the harmonization of the industry, I believe this implementation for purpose is what we need to achieve. And again, here we also look into global ecosystems. So when we're talking about Europe, Europe itself, and I think Italian supply chain is very innovative. It is something that has been always in that industry, very forward thinking. And when I'm looking at the ecosystems that we're serving, and when we're talking about climate change, this is clearly not a European topic. So we're looking into enabling also a global supply chain to pick up that pace. And when you are reading what's behind me, the roadmap to zero, we understand as a journey. And it's a journey where the European supply chain is already far ahead. So when we say the goal is a detox-free or a toxic-free supply chain, then I would say that is the ultimate goal. And the European supply chain is in many ways and already far down that road. When we go in emerging countries, we do see they're just entering that space. And the beauty about a global framework like ZDHC is it's sort of keeping the balance when the industry is moving in new production regions and there is no legislation in terms of water stewardship or air emissions. There can easily, from a competition perspective, it can flip around that they can offer much cheaper, and I'm not even talking about labor, cost of labor. They can offer a lot cheaper prices by not keeping environmental standards. And the beauty about a global framework is if this is policed, and I'm saying policed by the brands, that they can't go below those requirements, we are achieving a global standard. And that is stronger than any legislation that can be done. And I can only recommend everyone who is engaging in this program to keep up with latest technology because, and I think Prato is a really good example on this, it is a competitive advantage when you can give an indication that this is a factory that is safe to buy from. And in 2030, looking in this direction, we also want to stage those that are engaging in the program by giving them credits for their achievements. One of the early asks that I had in the Greenpeace campaign was, they said, Frank, why don't you do a frontrunner program? A frontrunner program, and that was a little bit what I considered that the Detox catwalk was in the early days. It was comparing the progress that brands were making, and there's a danger that this becomes just a marketing event. And in this regards, we created a leader program for our key stakeholders. And looking to 2030, I said brands have the responsibility to change behavior or to drive behavior change in supply chains. And we are assessing them based on how well they're implementing our program. So KPMG, that's a third party, is assessing these KPIs and is giving an evaluation on how well they're implementing. They are setting requirements to their suppliers, and we started our supplier leader program, so Supplier to Zero, that's the name, in June this year, and we have a guided evaluation how we take manufacturers by their hand and guide them on the way to implement for purpose. And this is not only a sustainability journey, this is also a commercial journey that indicates that there is a business case. If I reduce complexity, if I have an automated doses, auto doses, so we have showcases where we can really clearly outline to suppliers, there is also a very attractive business case behind there. So by creating this case for suppliers to implement for purpose, this hopefully is creating an ecosystem for the chemical suppliers that are in our chemical supplier leader program to invest in research and development. And that's what we need. And most of all, to produce better qualities. So the target for 2030 for us is also moving away from evaluating factory performance and going in the direction to evaluate product performance. This is essential when we look into circularity, when we look into material databases. And I'd like to close that question is, our job's far from done. I think this journey is going to take me into retirement. And that's for sure. And it's getting broader. It's definitely getting broader. And when I'm reading in the interview that the textile industry is considered to be the biggest polluter in the economy, I would really like to challenge that, as we have neighboring supply chains that we would love to involve in that. So there are huge supply chains that we are sharing. And that would help us to accelerate our impact by jumping on that train. And maybe, Chiara, this is a good thing if you look into automotive, or if you look into neighboring supply chain that goes even into technical textiles. And even if it comes, not just phasing out hazardous chemistry, we would be happy working with guidelines and really restricting the dangerous use of chemistry there. So it's a job far from done, but it's an exciting journey.
Grazie Frank, okay. Grazie per la risposta.
Did I forget something?
No, no, non so, penso sia stato esaustivo. Magari ora vi faccio una brevissima domanda per vedere se volete, vi chiedo anche alcune cose. Gabriele,